have any Eritrean government representative. I did reach out to them. I did reach out to the Minister of Information through shabai.com, the Eritrean Embassy in Washington, D.C., and the Eritrean Embassy in New York. Yet we have not received any panelists that could participate in the session from those offices. And finally, I want to extend my appreciation to Professor Jennifer Regan. Jennifer Regan has been helping us with moderating many Eritrean sessions, a good friend of the Eritrean people. I'll say a bit about Professor Regan. She is a professor of international studies at Arcadia University since 2007. Her ethnographic research focused on political identity, teachers, migration, and refugees in Eritrea and Ethiopia. She is the author of 2 books, The Struggling State, Nationalism, Mass Militarization, and the Education of Eritreans, and Hosting States and Unsettled Guests, Eritrean Refugee in a Time of Migration Deterrence, which was published in 2024, co-authored with Amanda Poole. She has published numerous articles in fields of anthropology, African studies, international education, and has held fellowships from the Wolf Humanity Center between 2020 and 2021, the George Anhold Program in 2019, Fulbright at Addis Ababa University 2016 to 2017, and Asmara University between 2004 and 2005. The Spencer Foundation, or National Academy of Education, between 2012 and 2014, and the Social Science Research Council 2004 to 2005. She was awarded the 2021-2023 Steinbrecher Idod Chair at Arcadia University. Professor Regan, thank you very much for moderating this session for us, and I pass on the session to you.
Thank you very much, Meron. Thank you all for having me here. I'm honored and humbled to be asked to moderate this session, and I'm very eager to learn from our illustrious and expert panelists that we have here today. I'm going to go over a few guidelines that we've given to the panelists for today, and then I will introduce each of the panelists, and then I'll have a couple of questions for Meron, for our organizer, and then I'll have some questions for each of the panelists. Today, we aim to have an informative civil discussion about the important issue of divisions within the Eritrean diaspora. These divisions have emerged recently around a series of incidents at Eritrean festivals around the world that have resulted in violent clashes. Our panelists today are scholars and accomplished professionals who all bring with them various expertise, insight, and knowledge that will allow them to provide an analysis of these issues. We recognize that the panelists may disagree in their analysis and their understanding of some factual evidence. In the interest of having a productive discussion, we welcome panelists to share their own perspectives and analyses of these issues based on their scholarly and professional expertise. And we would prefer that panelists avoid directly commenting on what other panelists have said, particularly if they disagree, and instead to focus on what their own perspective is. We have 4 very accomplished panelists with us today, so we ask that each panelist be sensitive to time and make sure to allow time for other panelists to speak. For the first set of questions, each panelist will have 5 to 7 minutes to answer, and after that, we'd appreciate it if each follow-up question, if each panelist could take 1 to 2 minutes to answer that question. So I'm going to start with a few introductions. Each of our panelists is extremely accomplished, and we don't have time to read their full background. However, I encourage you to go to the website and read about their various accomplishments. Meron Semedar is our organizer. He is an educator, community organizer, human rights, and international refugee advocate. He's addressed many bodies, including the UN, USCIS, One Young World, and many universities and communities on the global refugee crisis and human rights in Eritrea. His works have been published and featured in many places, and he holds a degree in civil engineering from South Africa, an MA in International Studies from the University of San Francisco, and a Master's of Public Affairs from UC Berkeley's Goldman School of Public Policy. And you can read more about him on the website. Yonatan Tuweldi is a scholar and educator currently serving as assistant teaching professor of media and communications at Penn State University. His areas of research and interests lie in visual culture, intersectionality of transnationalism, diaspora, peace, and new media. He earned a PhD in media arts and studies from the School of Media Arts and Studies at Ohio University. Dr. Twelde has contributed publications in many peer-reviewed journals in the fields of visual culture, film, and journalism, and he's presented work at many international conferences, and you can read more about him on the website. Saba Kidani Heritage received her PhD from George Mason's Jimmy and Rosalind Carter School for Peace and Conflict Resolution. Dr. Heritage received a Master of Arts in African Studies with political science emphasized from UCLA and a Master of Arts degree in Peace and Justice Studies from the University of San Diego. She's born and raised in Ethiopia and moved to Eritrea in 1992. She completed her undergraduate studies in political science at the now defunct University of Asmara. She also studied at the University of Addis Ababa and is the founder of the pioneer media organization Erisat, which we're all familiar with. And you can read more about Erisat and her other accomplishments on the website. Daniel Teklai is a writer and activist who is a co-founder and chairman of One Nation, a grassroots-based organization seeking to bring democratic change in Eritrea. He co-founded the cyber-based Eritrean Youth Solidarity for Change and served as its chairman until 2015. He has written dozens of articles on issues of constitutional governance and is one of the contributing authors of the book Eritrea: Affirming Nationhood and Sovereignty, and is a regular commentator on Eritrean media. Hermon Berhane Ogba Mikel currently works as the head of program lecturer in journalism at the Cape Peninsula University of Technology, and previously was a lecturer in the field of public relations management, media studies, and communication. He obtained a doctoral degree in informatics from CPUT, a master's degree in information and knowledge management from the University of Stellenbosch, and a bachelor's of technology in public relations management from CPUT. He also has a Bachelor's of Arts in English from University of Asmara. He's the co-founder of Frontline Africa, a nonprofit organization that mobilizes African youth to create awareness of the significance of African unity, develop awareness of harmful social maladies such as racism, xenophobia, and other parochial social sentiments, harness the importance of social and economic integration, and promote the usefulness of the creation of coexistence of the diverse ethnic groups and united Africa with a common vision. I'm very honored to be here today with these panelists and really looking forward to the discussion that we have today. Before I start with questions for the panelists, a couple of questions to provide some context for this session for Meron. Why are we having this session? Why are we having it at this particular time? And why are we having it at UC Berkeley?
All right. Professor Regan, thank you so much for those set of questions. Well, as Eritreans, we are in a difficult time and has also been for a while, for the last 2 decades at least. People are confused, divided, looking for clarity. There is wrong information. Populist and social media has grown greatly, including artificial intelligence is having impact and clouding the judgment of our people. The fabric of what it means to be Eritrean, including the role of family in our society, is disintegrating. Conditions as a result of transnational impact because of what's happening in Eritrea and the Eritrean government festivals that have been held in the diaspora are having or becoming a source of violence in our communities. It is in this circumstance that we want Eritrean scholars to play a role to provide clarity for Eritreans and non-Eritreans alike. This is also to encourage Eritrean scholars in the process of change, freedom, justice, democracy, and to provide a better information for our people and for better Eritrea and for better life for Eritreans, both in Eritrea and in the diaspora. And why we're doing it at UC Berkeley? Well, UC Berkeley has been the home of social justice for many decades. And we're trying to influence the faculty, the students here so that they can do research about Eritrea. There's also one of the biggest Eritrean diaspora community in the Bay Area, and literally in the doorsteps of UC Berkeley. And hopefully also we can influence universities such as the University of California, Berkeley, to admit students from Eritrea in a situation where education is deteriorated. And it's in this light we're trying to host this session, but most importantly for our scholars to shine and provide clarity on the current situations happening both in Eritrea, but mainly here in the diaspora.
Thank you very much for that. We appreciate that context. So each of the panelists has been given a few questions to start us off with. So we've asked each speaker to speak for 5 to 7 minutes on the following questions. What is going on with these incidents at Eritrean festivals around the world? who's involved in these events from both the opposition and the supporters of the Eritrean government. Why are these incidents happening? Why are they happening now? Why are they happening at Eritrean festivals? How did the Eritrean community get here? And what do you think the significance of these events is? So it's our hope that this question will give everyone a chance to sort of lay out their particular perspective on these events. And I think in the interest of clarity, we'll go in the same order that I introduced people in. So why don't we start with Jonathan Tuwelde?
All right, thank you so much. In the simplest terms, the Brigade Nahamadu incidents that have been happening in various places involve Eritrean exiles expressing their frustrations with the oppressive government back home. Members of these movements are particularly upset about the divisive and hateful messages that are particularly spread during these festivals and other state-sponsored events in the diaspora. This increase, the current increase in protests has occurred as the Eritrean opposition has become stronger in many ways and more resolute in its mission to challenge the authoritarian rule that has lasted in Eritrea for 3 decades. To explain why these protests are not only justified, but also necessary, in my opinion, let me delve into the many layers of this intricate and yet complex situation. These festivals, deceptively presented as celebrations of Eritrean culture by the regime and its supporters, have consistently revealed themselves as platforms of state-sponsored indoctrination. I categorize these festivals as political gatherings, a characterization that becomes unmistakable and evident to anyone attending them. These events involve political seminars and speeches by representatives of the ruling party, a party that has held power in Eritrea since 1991. They also showcase propaganda performances that glorify the current state of affairs in Eritrea. Instead of promoting diversity and tradition, renowned singers perform songs that are commissioned and produced by the ruling party's Cultural Affairs Bureau. These songs weave false narratives and glorify the regime, effectively concealing the harsh realities on the ground from both those in attendance and those following the events through the media, mainly social media. One of the key factors fueling the anger that led to the formation of Brigade Nahamadu is the alarming rise in hate speech and trolling targeting pro-democracy Eritreans, which has been spread in these state-sponsored events such as festivals. These incidents occur not only within the festivals, but also in propaganda YouTube videos commissioned by the PFDJ and the propaganda department of the Eritrean army. During the festivals and in the content of the songs and poetry videos, those who dare to challenge the Eritrean regime are unfairly branded as Tigrayans or North Ethiopians or Tigrayan Ethiopians, even more egregiously as traitors, essentially stripping them of any acknowledgements or empathy. Remarkably, this hostile strategy has had the opposite effect and has been a driving force behind the rise of this transnational movement, Brigade Nahamadu. This movement is now more resolute than ever, not just in advocating for justice and democracy, but in actively striving to bring them to fruition. The manipulation constitutes a cruel form of gaslighting in those festival events, further intensifying the suffering of our people. And what infuriates the Eritrean diaspora and to be unified under the banner of the Brigade Nahamadu movement is a deliberate denial of the oppressive and militaristic regime that has transformed our homeland essentially into one of the world's most leading sources of refugees. These propaganda gatherings have suddenly become stages for ridiculing calls for justice, undermining the hard work of activists and suppressing voices of dissent, particularly the pleas of youth who have fled Eritrea, often risking their lives due to shoot-to-kill policies at the borders. Furthermore, these incidents and events have taken on a distinctly militaristic character. I'm talking about the events that take place in the festivals. Attendees and performers often wear Eritrean military uniforms, and even children are encouraged to sing along to combat songs while holding toy Kalashnikovs. This militarization raises not only concerns about the nation's future, but also reflects the exclusive nationalism promoted at these festivals. They exclusively celebrate loyalty to the regime's approved version of citizenship while conveniently overlooking the suffering and oppression endured by many Eritreans. It is essential to underscore that these festivals are orchestrated by representatives of the ruling People's Front for Democracy and Justice, PFDJ party. Bettina Corner, in her 2006 research publication, shed light on the fact that Eritrean festivals function as platforms for promoting the state's preferred version of history and memories, and the fervent nationalism promoted at these gatherings is inherently militaristic, I have to say, which is evident in the attire of both the performers and the attendees who often don military uniforms. The narrative constructed at this event is exclusive and recognizes the regime's approved form of citizenship, as I have already said, and only acknowledges those who are loyal to the government while deliberately ignoring the existence of thousands of Eritreans unjustly imprisoned in Eritrea. This stark contrast between the government's narrative and the harsh reality endured by many Eritreans is a central issue fueling the discontent and protests. The nationalism promoted at this event is strongly militaristic and presents a narrative which is highly selective and only recognizes the state-sanctioned model of citizenship that is obedient and loyal to the regime. In the process, these euphoric propaganda stages exemplify what Johan Galtung would describe as cultural violence, because they serve as means of denying the direct and structural forms of violence that afflict the domestic population, perpetuating a distorted view of the situation within Eritrea. The recent surge of unrest among Eritreans uniting under Brigadier Hamadou serves as a powerful reflection of the deep-seated resentment and anger harbored within the Eritrean diaspora against the regime. For years, Eritreans living abroad who seek justice, democratic change, and an end to repression have watched as their peaceful efforts were often dismissed or even ridiculed by the regime. What sets this movement apart is that Eritreans from all walks of life, various nationalities, and political backgrounds have converged in this revolutionary movement. However, there is a crucial distinction in this time around. They are not merely calling on the regime to heed their pleas or chanting down, down to the dictator as they did fruitlessly for years. Now they are taking proactive steps to reclaim the narrative. Brigadier Hamadou have devised a two-pronged strategy. Plan A involves petitioning local authorities and courts to halt these festivals, which they argue are used to prolong the repression and suffering of the Eritrean people and maintain the regime's grip on power. This approach reminds these authorities of the international and US sanctions imposed against the regime. If Plan A doesn't yield results, Brigadier Hamadou has not been hesitating to take direct action. They have been physically disrupting festival grounds or blocking entrances to force the shutdown of these events. And this signifies a shift from passive protest to active intervention, reflecting the determination of Eritreans in the diaspora to effect change and put an end to the suffering endured by their compatriots. It is crucial to emphasize that Brigadier Hamadou's protests and disruptions are not acts of violence, but rather forms of symbolic resistance. Their primary goals are to claim spaces once controlled by those who spread fear and mistrust, to challenge when the regime sends counter-protesters to obstruct Brigadier Hamadou's activities. For example, in Israel, the Eritrean regime has gone to the extreme of mobilizing a violent counter-group called Rabbi Gumbar, which translates as the Force Offensive in Tigrinya. Members of this group confronted Brigadier Hamadou protesters in Tel Aviv, armed with sticks, rocks, metal bars, and some even resorted to using handguns against pro-democracy demonstrators, as documented in a report by Haaretz newspaper in Israel. In many ways, this movement is a direct response to the regime's dismissal of peaceful calls for change. It serves as an appeal to the international community to pay attention to their struggle and the tremendous suffering they have endured. In conclusion, the incidents occurring at Eritrean festivals are not isolated occurrences, but rather part of a larger struggle for justice, democracy, and human rights. While these actions may appear confrontational, they are driven by a profound desire for positive change and an end to the suffering experienced by the Eritrean people. Thank you for your attention.
Thank you very much for those comments. Just to remind panelists to please try to stick to time so that we have a lot to talk about and to make sure we have enough time. If we were in person, I would have a sign that I would hold up that would say 1 minute warning, 2 minute warning. So what I'll just use the raise hand symbol when you're getting to about 5 minutes, and then I'll sort of give you a couple more raised hands just to give people a sense of where you are with time. So let's move on to Saba Kadane Heritage.
Thank you very much, Professor Reagan, and every panelist here, and also Meron for organizing this. So Eritrean diaspora has been engaging in activities that they see as important in asserting their rights and expressing their stand in regards to the policies of the Eritrean government. On one side, demanding justice, freedom, and accountability, while the other side, quote unquote, supporting the Eritrean regime side for the most part, out of fear or fear of losing some benefit that comes with supporting the Eritrean regime, such as being able to return home, visit families, buy and own properties, be buried in one's homeland, etc. Recently, Western media has described these two opposing groups of Eritrean diaspora as opponents and supporters of the Eritrean regime. For example, in Tel Aviv, the two opposing groups were distinguished as red-shirted pro-Eritrean government or festival supporters or festival goers versus the blue-shirted opposition to the Eritrean regime, which is by design used to reflect the federal-era Eritrean flag with a blue background and olive branches on it, thus dubbed the Blue Revolution. The pro-Eritrean government festival goers are older in age. Women dominate the number, and that means that they do not have any direct connection to the dire reality that the blue-shirted Eritrean diaspora or the Eritrean refugees have experienced by the Eritrean regime. So what we are witnessing is a generational gap in these two opposing camps, where the refugees who left Eritrea in the last 20 years so have a recent memory of the oppressive system in the country and the risks they took to escape the horrific experiences of detention without due process, torture, and a run for their lives at the border in the face of a shoot-to-kill policies of the Eritrean government. The government policies, the government creates this fear. Oh, wait a minute. Where am I? The government creates this fear among diaspora that they are being watched or being reported about their activities, and every communication is transmitted through to the Eritrean government supporters in a controlled and centralized manner via its embassies and consulates around the world. On the other hand, the recent refugees who have organized themselves and are saying enough in challenging the regime and its activities to rise up and openly and directly challenging the regime sponsored festivals in Europe, North America, and other countries, thereby creating a media coverage and attention about the Eritrean government oppressive systems. How opposition is expressed needs to be understood within this context of the harm and the suffering that the Eritrean youth experienced for years by the regime. Now they boldly are challenging. And these oppositions are expressed in many different ways and are born out of years of suffering, pain, and frustration that they have. And they have a justified anger that at times might turn violent. The resulting violence has been, for the most part, being provoked and started by the pro-Eritrean government supporters, which then escalate into violent encounters between the two sides, requiring the police to intervene. In Israel, for example, the two opposing groups have who have many in common in terms of their status as the case for many in Western countries and other countries where they are refugees and asylum seekers. Both sides escaped the oppressive systems of the Eritrean regime and trying to adjust lives in the countries of their refuge. In fact, there is some legal and immigration implication for their cases for those claiming political asylum and supporting the very regime that they are seeking protection from in their host countries. That leaves their immigration status in limbo and might even result in losing their status once it is established that their application is fraudulent or not credible asylum claim. And why these incidents are happening? Because the Eritrean regime continues to push for its propaganda that by hosting these so-called festivals to give false picture of the reality in Eritrea. The reality is people are not only denied their basic civil and political rights, but also struggling to make ends meet as they struggle to access electricity, water, etc. to cook their daily meals, even is a challenge. Why are they happening now? Because the newly arrived refugees from Eritrea through many arduous and dangerous routes to Europe, North America, most of them in their early or mid or late 20s, said enough is enough and planned a direct, non-violent protest, which at times turned violent. What we need to understand is that Eritrean regime, through its embassies, is the one that is organizing these events, and these events are not festivals as they are promoted by the regime and its supporters. These are party rallies where only those who subscribe to the ruling party's agenda could attend and participate. These events are also used to fundraise for the only ruling party that has ruled the country since its birth in early 90s. The blue-shirted pro-democracy advocates who oppose the Eritrean regime defend their actions to get all these so-called festivals canceled because, one, these festivals have nothing to do with culture. They defend this. What actually happens in these festivals or events is far from being cultural, rather war propaganda, hate speeches, and the othering of Eritreans who oppose the government as unpatriotic sellouts or traitors, etc., further widening the divide and polarization of the Eritrean diaspora. Pro-democracy advocates file documents to show that exactly what happens in this so-called festival and to respective cities and officials in the cities that these so-called festivals are happening in what they call Plan A, which is the legal and the formal outreach to cities and local government representatives about the nature and of the planned festivals. If that did not come, if that doesn't go through, then the festival is allowed to happen. Then they use what they call Plan B, which involves protesting at the location of the event and using different non-violent direct actions, such as blocking access to certain streets or entrances. And for example, Seattle, there was chanting, dancing, poem recital, and blocking of the entrance to the event where the event was happening. And even the names of these protesters used to campaign against these so-called festivals is by itself telling. For example, a campaign for Sweden, the campaign was named after the detained Eritrean journalist Dawit Isaak campaign. And for the one in Seattle was named after Lampedusa victims. So even the name of these campaigns that are organized by protesters of the Eritrean government festivals is telling the purpose and the aim of why they are doing these things. And so what we have to understand that these are the symptoms, what we're talking about. What we need to talk about or address is the root cause of the problem. The root of the problem for what we witness today is the oppressive system of the Eritrean regime that has been controlling the entire population the last 3 decades and now being challenged by energetic, determined, and dedicated Eritrean youth who see the opportunity in exposing the regime's nature by getting the media attention around the world and telling their horror stories about what they went through, not only in Eritrea, but also along the way in their dangerous journeys as they seek refuge in several countries to reach Europe or North America. The example in Israel could give us a better picture. The embassy organized a group of people wearing red shirts to engage in a street fights with protesters. There were people armed with guns, wooden sticks, metal bars, rocks, and we know the police used live ammunition to disperse the crowd that resulted in the hospitalization of hundreds, including the police. The problem is the foreign interference of the Eritrean government in the lives of the Eritrean diaspora around the world, using its embassies and consulates and its agents, disturbing the peace among the community members. These interferences include, not limited to the following. Let me state a few. Interfering in community centers, associations, and organizations directly or indirectly through its agents by controlling, influencing, and affecting their operations. Another one, exerting undue pressure or control on Eritrean religious institutions, especially the Eritrean Orthodox Church, by forcing them to send money to Eritrea and impacting the selection of their leaders and programs. Hijacking Eritrean events, the ones we're talking about, such as festivals and other national ceremonies or holidays, and using them as propaganda promoting events, hate language, radicalization and polarization of the Eritrean communities, and fundraising for its operations, the regime's activities and works. Recruiting and suspecting members of the diaspora community by creating vigilante groups that deal with any group that opposes the Eritrean government, disseminating negative information about Eritrean businesses and other institutions that do not share or abide by the policies of the Eritrean government. So trying to isolate Eritrean socially, Eritrean socially and community-wise, who are considered to be independent-minded or opposed to the government policies. So this shows us the interference of the Eritrean government in the lives of the diaspora community, and the importation of its oppressive tactics and methods into the diaspora communities overseas. What the root cause of all these problems that we're witnessing these days in the activities of the pro-democracy Eritrean youngsters around the world. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Let's move on to Herman Berhane Agma-Mikel. You're muted.
Okay, actually, this Eritrean festivals has been happening since 1970s. It's not a new thing. And it's saying people who attend in the Eritrean cultural festivals, pro-government or this and that it's an insult to the intelligence of people who attend there, actually. Even I saw some people who are so-called opposition camp also attending in the festivals. It's trying to get together just once a year and celebrating and meeting and socializing. That's how I see it. I mean about Brigade Hamadu. For me, it's a disillusioned group actually, because in 2011, some of these people who are instigating Brigade Hamadu, they were invited by the TPLF-led government in Ethiopia, and they were shuttling. There were about 40 or whatever groups, as I was told by Dan Connell, and they thought that TPLF will push into Asmara and put them in power. That's not how struggle works. Actually, TPLF is an arch enemy of our people. They have committed so much atrocities when they, in Sana'a or in Barent or whatever, they went to the extent of sending rockets. And people who are organizing this Brigade Hamadu, I see them in the screen, but they don't even go and throw stones with those people, that is actually a crime in itself. I mean, you can oppose, you can protest peacefully, but throwing stones and beating 70, 80-year-old people, it's not acceptable. Yeah, I respect others' opinions, but I don't support that kind of group, But it's lifetime. I mean, I have seen. So what I'm saying is, it's a frustrated group, because I saw during the war in Tigray, for example, they were talking about Tigray prevails and so on, and without shame, they also attend the TPLF organized festivals themselves, but nobody is going there and throwing stones on them, So it's better if people respect each other, okay? Because people have also the right to support whoever they want to support. I mean, if you're telling me you are fighting for justice, but you're doing it in an unjust way, then that is not acceptable. So I just want to be brief and spontaneous and clear forward. It's better if people actually fight for what they are fighting for in a peaceful manner. That is, I believe, in a non-violent way. But throwing stones, especially in a host nation, you went there as a refugee because you needed protection, but you're doing the same crime that you are alleging that you are trying to fight against. So that is unacceptable. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And let's move on to Daniel Teklay.
All right, let me unmute myself. Hopefully you can hear me. Great. And I will also time myself, but I'll also look for your signal. So let me get started. Anyway, good morning, everyone. First of all, thank you to my friend Meron Samadar for organizing this event, and for UC Berkeley and all these other esteemed institutions who are sponsoring this event for us. Thank you so much. And I also like to thank you, Dr. Jennifer Regan, for moderating this. And I also like to thank my fellow panelists for taking the time to do this. When I saw the title, the title of the topic of what we are discussing, it says a divided diaspora and the future of Eritrea. Obviously, that's a very broad one. You know, talking about divided diaspora, which in itself sounds like as if there is a 50-50 divide, which is very, very not true. And then, of course, the future of Eritrea is a very, very broad subject. But obviously, we are here to discuss what's been happening in recent months, and what we have seen in Eritrean festivals. And at the end of the day, it's not what's going on, the positive things that's going on in them. We are addressing the violence, the property damage, the arrests, the attack on police, the things that made the news. And for someone who may not be too familiar with Eritrea or Eritrean politics, for that matter, I'm sure this could be very confusing, especially if one glances at headlines and tidbits of news information. Oh, a bunch of immigrants from Eritrea are fighting each other, and it's not clear, and who is the good guy, who's the bad guy. People try to get the context from that, and unfortunately, sometimes it's always like, oh, one side supports the dictator, and the other one is pro-democracy, so there must be a good and a bad guy to the story. Obviously, it's more complicated than that, like everything is. But I'm here to shed light on, like the rest of our panelists, to shed on some background story on why this is actually happening, first of all, and then why at this time. And it's hard to do this in 5 minutes, in 4 minutes, but I will definitely try to do it. Let me start with a little background from who I am, and as it was mentioned in the introduction, my name is Daniel Taklai, and I'm an activist. Of course, we have other things, other professions that we do, but we are here because we are all activists who would like to see some democratic change in our country. Having said this, for the last 18 years, I've been involved as a writer, as an organizer. I founded organizations. I helped put together events and conferences and symposiums, and I continue to lead an organization, all in the effort to implement the Eritrean constitution so we can have rule of law in our country. That's the gist of it. Now, as we do this, as we go into talk about change in our country, there has been so far two schools of thought, basically. And what taught me in the last 18 years. One is those of us who say we can do this through nonviolent means, by encouraging the people of Eritrea or the change agents in Eritrea to make the transition from authoritarianism to democracy, to push for the implementation of the constitution within the country. And then there are those who say, no, we actually have to defeat we actually have to change the regime, even if it includes working with outsiders to militarily invade the country. And this debate has been going on for many years now. And finally, in 2018, I think there a dynamic changed that, because those who were counting on violent means, or by, as they call it, any means necessary, those who were collaborating with the then in power TPLF regime in Ethiopia, they were counting on them, and then all of a sudden the revolution came in Ethiopia and it toppled them. And Prime Minister Abiy Ahmed came to the picture and entered a peace agreement with Eritrea, and that changed the dynamic. That still left the TPLF intact with Tigray. 2 years later, a war ignited, as we all know. And this contention between those of us who were seeking change from within peacefully, and those who were looking forward to the TPLF or the Tigray Defense Force to invade Eritrea and bring that change, that created a contention. At the end of the day, after the war started, we those of us who say, even if we have to side with the government, because it's our nation, because we have to be on the side of our defense forces, those of us who chose that part start working closely, even with the so-called government supporters, even though we're all fellow Eritreans after all. Then the war ended, and as you saw in this year, during the celebration of Independence Day, for Eritrea's Independence Day in May, everyone who was previously opposing and everyone who sided with Eritrea and its forces celebrated Independence Day, I think in a very, very big way, including in Ethiopia, all over Europe, all over the world, pretty much. And I'm talking about hundreds of thousands of people coming together. That's where this opposition to these festivals came in, because they gave up on or any alternative to making a regime change using the TPLF. It was about, okay, now why don't we attack these festivals? Now, festivals, as you have heard many times, they've been going on for, at least in the United States, for 49 years. And I'll speed up. In Europe, at least for that much, in particular, if we're talking about North America, for 50 years, in Sweden in particular for about 25 years, in Germany, the same one. So this has been going on pre-independence, post-independence, during what we call this dictatorship era. It did not divide Eritreans, it did not cause violence in the past. But as I keep saying, it's related to what was going on in Ethiopia, the way it ended with the surrender of the TPLF and with the Pretoria Peace Agreement. Things changed. Now, if I can quickly mention what's being said here, what they call Plan A, Plan B. Now, Plan A is, let's try to stop these festivals from happening, is what they say. Let's do it legally. I don't think there is anyone who can argue with that. To do anything trying to do it legally is okay. But at the end of the day, there's a freedom of speech, freedom of assembly for everyone, no matter what, whether you are opposed to the government or are calling for regime change. It applies equally to all of us, including people like myself. We want democratic change, but we don't want violence. So that's so to those who are surprised to see somebody like me who is actually defending what we consider government supporting and festivals and so on. I hope this the background that I just gave you makes more sense. But at the end of the day, what we are talking about is it okay to use violence to achieve some kind of political aim? The classic definition of that, and I'm sure all you scholars would agree, is if you use violence for the aim of some political aim, it's called terrorism. There is no ifs and buts about it. When I got there, I went to the festivals in Oakland, California, in Seattle, Washington. When I attended those festivals, of course, I would have my own reason. I would have many positive things to say about them. But at the end of the day, I'm using my First Amendment right to express myself, to gather with whomever I want. And at the end of the day, just for the sake of saving time, if I choose to support the regime of Isaias Afwerki today, there's nobody who can legally or without using violence could stop me that. That's where Plan B comes in. Plan B for them is, if we can't stop them legally, if they use their rights, then we will attack them. And of course, that's where attacking the police comes in. And that's why we have 26 police officers in Germany got injured, about 30 of them in Israel, in Denmark, in Sweden, and Canada. So it's actually not only going after what they call regime supporters, and also people like me, for that matter, because they can't even differentiate us. What is worse now is they are going after law enforcement. So there's this policy equivalence that's going on right now. It's not two people fighting or two sides fighting. It's one side premeditated attack on the other. And again, at the end of the day, this is not going to stand. Now, what do we do? Of course, law and order comes first. It's not even up to us. If you attack the police, if you attack me, now you are violating the laws against battery, against harassment, and not to mention terrorism. And then there's burning of buildings, attacking the elderly. There is nothing about this symbolic violence that they call it. It's actually actual violence where hundreds of people actually have been injured so far. And where it's headed is really, really dangerous. And those of you who know better, those of you who consider yourself scholars, should definitely start with denouncing violence, first of all. And then at the end of the day, this is certainly not only the Eritrean community, but the overall the immigrant community in Europe, in Israel, in America, right-wingers who hate the presence of immigrants are already using this against many. And at the end of the day, as I wrap up, what I like to say is, yes, we do want better things for Eritrea, but there is a better alternative. There is a better way, a non-violent way. And if you can't convince, if you can't sell your ideas non-violently, then you don't have an idea. That's what I want to say for now. Thank you for listening.
Thank you all for your initial thoughts and comments. There's a lot more to say about this question about why these protests are turning violent. And we're going to come back to that question in a minute. But a couple of follow-up questions on these questions of this thought about the festival itself. I want to start, Herman, with you with this next question. Is just give us a little bit, and again, keep your comments to about 1 minute here. But just have been going on for a very long time.
Community themselves who actually arrange these festivals. I myself, for example, where I am here in Cape Town, I don't ask the embassy to organize an independence festival, for example. We do it here. We contribute money, and we call also other people from other countries. Also, it's not only Eritreans in these festivals. So it's an individual choice.
Thank you. Turn the question to you now with a slight addition to it. And that's, you mentioned the festivals in Israel where you have asylum seekers, both who oppose and support the government, who attend these festivals. And I was wondering if you could expand on why Eritreans who have fled the country are attending festivals and what that means to them.
Yeah, I think that's a great question. In fact, if these are in fact festivals, I think everybody should be welcome. The previous speaker, I forgot his name, was saying that this is for everybody, right, including other nationalities, not necessarily Eritreans, right? So this should be open for everybody. In fact, the fact of the matter is these festivals are not open for everybody. You have to be in line with the government of Eritrea and in agreement with the government policies, and be supporting the government, whatever form or shape you can be expressing that support. One of it is by attending those festivals. So it's the very fact that it's exclusively for the regime supporters makes it that this is not a cultural thing, because if it's culture, you not only want everybody within your country, but also others to share your culture and whatever uniqueness you might want to share with the rest of the world. So I think that's the problem. And then, in fact, so the Eritrean community in Israel that that they have been living sort of kind of managing their relationship, even though those who are there as refugees claiming protection from the very government that has been a reason for them persecuting them are now kind of almost literally armed with materials to attack the other group of similar Eritreans who are asylum seekers like them, but who have a defensible and a credible asylum protection, because they cannot go back to Eritrea. But those who are supporting the government, they have a chance to return to Eritrea. Then that automatically disqualifies for having a credible asylum application. So that's what I was implying to, because it's going to create a problem. In fact, Benjamin Netanyahu said that they're going to, return all these Eritreans. But I think that the first step is that to look into each case and see who has real fear or credible fear of persecution in the country where they came from. So I think that's what I meant, but it would create for those who are supporting the government a serious problem for their asylum cases.
Thank you. Daniel or Jonathan, would either of you like to add anything to the question of who attends festivals?
Yes, I would. I would like to say that it would be imprecise to characterize Eritrean festivals as cultural events, because it is very clear for everyone that Eritrean festivals have always been political since their inception. If we think about the 1980s, when you had EPLF, even ELF festivals, these were festivals that were organized by these guerrilla freedom movements in the Eritrean fields. And these festivals were used to bring together Eritreans, of course, at the time, to give support to the armed revolution. And these were sites where political speeches were given, where books were sold, where performers from the army performed their songs, their theater plays, and etc. Right? So yeah, it makes sense that in the beginning this used to be a widely diverse and widely attended events, but as things took turn for the worse in terms of democratization, particularly after 2000, it became clear that a lot of people were opposed to the government. So if you go to any Eritrean festival, you would be met with speech, with political propaganda content. These are not performers who come from Eritrea on their own, but these are performers that are commissioned and sponsored by the cultural affairs of the ruling party, the PFDJ, and the Eritrean Army Defense propaganda unit, Gosgwas and Habaretan, right? So no other singers or cultural performers have the ability to come to the United States or to Europe and organize these types of events on their own. So anyone going to attend these festivals, yes, there is music, yes, there is dancing, but a large part of it is going to be propaganda that glorifies the state of affairs in Eritrea and propaganda that denies and ridicules the suffering of the Eritrean people and ridicules Eritrean democracy proponents like ourselves who persistently have been calling for democracy and justice in Eritrea.
Thank you. Daniel, do you have anything to add?
Yes, I do have to add, and I'm calm and collected, but I think safe to say probably I'm the only one who actually attended this events, and even it's ridiculous. I'm not addressing my fellow panelists directly, but first of all, let's at least hear it from those who attend, and not to mention those of us who claim ourselves not in support of the status quo or the regime. And then more importantly, there's thousands of people, especially fellow asylum seekers. Why do they attend? That's actually where the story is. It's easy to say I'm for this and I'm against this, but to say that there are some changes that I would like to see in my country, but the way to do them is by actually attending, by actually engaging, by actually participating, because when it's all and done, if we can't celebrate Eritrea together, and then what are we talking about changing and bringing things for the better? So what goes on in these festivals? First of all, the amount of people, or the number of people that attended, at least in the Seattle Festival, was quite amazing. I can easily say about 4,000 people, some people say 5,000 people. And the number of people who were actually protesting outside to say that they are against this, and it's their right, and I admire that when they do it peacefully. It was about less than 100 in my count, because I was physically there, about 65 people. So there's this just policy equivalence to it. And then who attends? Families attend with kids. Out of this about 3,000, 4,000, 5,000 people that I saw, I think I saw easily about 1,000 children, under 18, under 10, playing all over. So it's a very carnival, festive activity. Then at the end of the day, the festival itself, because it's a continuation of what has been going on for years and years, the format is you bring people together, not only about culture and other, that's not in a way to sugarcoat it. What people want is this sense of patriotism, sense of nationalism, sense of that we all belong, we are building a nation. And before independence, it was about we will have a nation. And then post-independence is we still have a nation. And from national anthem to, yes, government representatives and embassy folks, they definitely attend. And it's welcomed, because those are the ones who will tell you this is what's happening in the country. Now, there you can openly oppose and or ignore or what have you. In the case of the Seattle Festival, there was actually a public seminar. I think there was a PFDJ seminar that maybe all their members attend. I'm not sure about that, but there was a public seminar that about 700 people attended, and I attended there as well. there were updates from governors of different regions of Eritrea to their ability, like all government officials would tell you, here is what's happening good, here's what's happening not so good. We are all in it together. And then there were about 20, 21 questions, and they were all videotaped. I hope they release them soon. What I consider very good questions in terms of what you ask your officials to do. So when I attended, nobody asked me who I am. Of course, I am relatively better known as the opposer or opposition or somebody who wants to see rule of law in Eritrea. And but at the same time, it was my presence was actually more welcome than I even deserve, than I even thought, because what people want is they're not afraid of this different views. So to demonstrate that, to make my story short for you, because it's better to show than tell, what I did then is I started live streaming from the festival itself, just to show people what people are doing, what the children are doing, what people are dancing for, the number of people, the kind of things, the festivity, and of course, a lot of people are not even happy to see that, but those videos were viewed by, I would say hundreds of thousands of views since May, and that's the reality. Now, one may agree or may disagree about going. I respect that. But when that same festival in Seattle was, after we went to bed, was actually attacked, and thankfully there was enough security to prevent further damage, but the tents were destroyed, everything that they could find. And if they could find somebody who attended the festival, they would have smashed them with metal bars. They would have burned the tents if they could. All sorts of violence that we saw in Sweden, in Israel, and other places. So that's what's happening. At the end of the day, do we have a right to express ourselves, or do we not? That's the gist of it.
Thank you for all your answers. So I think we can see that we have a lot of different perspectives on what the festivals themselves actually are. And I suspect that there will be a lot of different perspectives about the next question I want to ask. The question of violence, and so there's a question of protest, which I think everyone's laid out the position of protest, why protests need to happen, why protests are happening, and what the festivals are, which there's some disagreement about. But there's a question about violence, and why is disruption turning violent and leading to these incidents? So I'd like to turn this question to all of you. Why are these incidents, protests that are intended to be disruptive, turning violent? What impact does violence have on the community specifically? And what's the significance of this violence, both for the diaspora and inside Eritrea? And a final question, why these have happened in several locations around the world. So why are people continuing to attend both festivals and protests, knowing that these seem to be likely to turn violent? And you can raise your hands, and I'll take people in any order that they'd like to offer their thoughts. Yeah, Daniel.
Oh, sure. Sorry, to get ahead of you guys. Why are they turning violent? The question is actually, it's not they're turning violent, it's premeditated violence. Literally, it's in the plan, it's in the playbook. Plan A, do this legally. Plan B, let's go violent. Now, Plan B says that if we can't legally shut them or force the city or the city council or somebody to take steps to cancel the event, Plan B is we will protest. Now, protest is fine. Now, the part of the protest is what? Okay, if you are going to legally protest, you will have to get a permit, and you will have to be a certain distance away from or whatever the law says. Usually it's like you can be across the street, you can be that far, because that's part of preventing violence. Now, part of their Plan B is though, they would get a permit for that, and then they would break the police lines, they will attack the police, they would make it into the festival if they could, and do all sorts of violence. And then as part of that as well is, as festival attendees are actually walking in, hurling insults and all that goes back and forth. To me, it's part of expression anyway. Everybody has freedom to even say an insult if they want to. But that is where what I call, violence by protest comes in. Now, it's fair to ask, why would people go? Because by design, it's like people know that if if part of their plan is we will go there, we will intimidate you, we will stop you, that's the exact very reason why people participate. No, we will not be intimidated. We will never kneel down, because this is part of a design to not only after, protest dictatorship in Eritrea, but it's to go after Eritreanness, or what we call Eritreanism or Eritreanet. They are against hoisting the flag. They are against singing the national anthem. They are against any patriotic songs that actually, the reason we have an independent country is that kind of spirit. So since they are going after what we call the spirit of Eritreans, everyone who opposes the regime and who openly supports, and those who not necessarily express themselves, all gather together. At least we agree on something, that Eritrea or Eritreanism is under attack, and we are going to protect it together. So that's the reason, especially in Sweden, after these tents were burned and there was even a helicopter and fire engines and so on. 3 hours later, I don't know, about 10,000 people showed up to say, hell no, we will, our festival will go on. That's what's happening.
Thank you. Saba.
Well, there are so many things that we need to correct here. These festivals, I think I personally try to lay out what they are. They are nothing cultural. These are party rallies that are being organized by the ruling party in Eritrea to promote its propaganda, to promote its message, to divide and antagonize and polarize the Eritrean diaspora that has been living peacefully, managing their relationship in spite of their political or differences. But this time around, the regime is actually, to the question why these festivals are happening, they wanted to continue. They wanted to continue the divide. They wanted to continue to increase the polarization among the peaceful, hardworking Eritrean diaspora that has lived in many years in these different countries, that they are now engaging in this confrontational ways. So exactly the point that I'm trying to make in my first response, that the source of these violent actions and the result of all these interactions that ended up in violence are coming from the regime and its supporters' side. So the Eritreans that gather to thinking that they're there to celebrate festivals are there knowingly and unknowingly to promote the regime's propaganda of war, hate speech, and antagonizing the Eritrean diaspora that has lived peacefully for the most part of their exile, right? So I think we have to distinguish that. So I think that even the language that has been used in this panel to othering other Eritreans that have a different opinion from the government as unpatriotic, as an Eritreans, is actually what is being promoted by the regime itself. So I think this is the things that we have to identify, that these are not events that are organized by any individual Eritrean diaspora members. No, this is actually organized by the embassies and consulates that are throwing these so-called festivals, which I call them party rallies, PFDJ party rallies. And of course, people would want to come together and talk in Tigrinya or other languages they might be talking when they come together. So they need that fellowship. But when they come there, there's no space for a difference of opinion. You have to be molded in that thinking. This is what you're going to be doing. This is what you're going to be talking about. This is what you're going to be, you dancing to the tune of what space. And I would like to see the other Eritrean diaspora who are supporting the Eritrean regime to ask the question, if they are really worried about the violence that's happening on the streets of Europe or North America, there are our independent journalists that has been in dungeons 22 years and counting by the Eritrean, the very region that now we're seeing some of our diaspora members are supporting. Members of the high political leaders of the country, 11 of them. We don't know where these people are, whether alive or dead. So we're talking about violence. Let's talk about the violence that the regime has been putting our people under 22 years ago and before that. And as we speak right now, how many people are under in the dungeons of the PFDJ detention centers without no due process of law, without seeing any court of justice, without any visitation rights by their family members. their family members don't even know whether they are still alive or not. If we're going to talk about violence, let's talk about the source of this violence, which is the regime itself, putting the entire nation under its oppressive system and putting people in a space where they cannot even express any difference of opinion. So if we're calling that a cultural event, I think we might have to agree to disagree in the definition of what the festival means.
Thank you. Yes, Jonathan, go ahead.
All right, thank you. As I priorly stated, these events are very political, and in regards to the question about why people continue to go to these events, of course, there are a lot of Eritreans who, despite being victims of this very regime themselves, continue to support it, whether it's out of fear, whether it's out of survival guilt or other personal reason. I cannot, in my right mind, justify and try to pretend to be knowledgeable of why someone would continue to be a supporter and enforcer of the very system that has caused them to flee their homes and their livelihoods and seek refuge elsewhere. My other panelist has contributed in clarifying my point by talking about some of the seminars that took place in the Seattle festival, when he was talking about how there were government and state authorities. He was talking about governors giving speeches and giving seminars in those events. If that is not called state-sponsored and political, I don't know what would be. So these festivals, as I am trying to make clear, are essentially spaces where power of the Eritrean government is being contested, right? So for many Eritreans, they have been used for so many years to be manipulated, to be controlled, to be bullied and trolled by the long arms of the state through these embassies, through these consulates, through these community organizations that are not actually community organizations, but essentially associations that are run and controlled by the regime, as Saba has mentioned, including religious church associations and organizations. And the reason why these events are turning political is because the Brigade Hamadu and other justice-seeking Eritreans are trying to confront the regime. For many years, for 20 plus years, they have tried to do so by peaceful means, by non-violent means. Until very recently, Eritreans would go to sites of festivals and just chant down dictator and try to express their dissent and try to engage the regime and the supporters through nonviolent means. But what has that contributed? 20 years, nothing resulted except the Eritrean opposition being ridiculed and made fun of. That did not contribute into anything. So I am kind of confused when I hear in this panel about why things are turning violent and why we should not stick to non-violent, peaceful means, when we all have seen for so many years that this have not contributed into anything. Again, what I would like to say is the goal, and this is from my own reading, the goal and the target of this Brigade Hamadu incidents and protests are the festivals. They are not the people who are attending the festival, right? They are not targeting the women, the men, whoever is going to the festivals. The key goal is boycotting those festivals by petitioning to courts, to judges, to local authorities, trying to shut them down. If that doesn't work, then this transnational organization is moving towards the actual blocking and controlling of these spaces. So it is a struggle for controlling of these spaces where transnational, the event in Seattle, which I witnessed in person, and I would also like to correct my fellow panelists that there weren't only 60 people there, and I also felt like the number given about the number of regime supporting Eritreans in the event given us 4,000 sounds a bit exaggerated. The number I heard was quite lower than that. Around 2,000. And if you were to think about the number of Eritreans living just in the Seattle area, for example, with over 20,000 Eritreans, and you have this big state-sponsored event, and you only have 2,000, 3,000 Eritreans in that event, that also states that not every Eritrean is in wide support and in all of these celebrations. And a lot of that has to do with the very political nature of these events. And people who insist on going to these events are people who are trying to prove their loyalty to the regime, because these festivals are litmus papers, right? They're litmus tests of your loyalty to the regime. So if you want to prove your loyalty, you would dare to go to these events and risk your life, and sometimes even risk the life of your own child and ailing parents and grandparents. I wouldn't do that if I were a regime supporter, or if I had neutral viewpoints when it came to Eritrean politics. I wouldn't dare to risk myself, as our fellow panelists said about Eritreans in Sweden, for example, who after the violent turn of events, who dare to go back to the same events and try to conduct the same festivals and events that cause all the violence and bloodshed. I also see a lot of irresponsibility from the Eritrean government and the consulates and the organizers of this event, because what we consistently see in, whether it's in Sweden, whether it's in Canada, in Norway, in Holland, for example, is that these regimes, this governments, local governments and the police have been doing a lot to shut down these events because of the imminent danger that is coming from the pursuing clashes. However, the regime is not taking similar steps, trying to avoid bloodshed between its citizens. So if we had a responsible regime, if we had responsible organizers of these festivals, and if these festivals truly were as innocent as they are being described right now, if they were just about enjoying each other's company, enjoying your culture, your identity, why are so many of your fellow citizens so enraged and out there trying to
Sorry to interrupt you. We're getting very short on time. I'm sorry.
Yes. So that's my point. So there is a great deal of irresponsibility on the organizers, and that, in my opinion, is a big contributor to why so much violence is ensuing. Thank you.
Okay, so thanks.
Can I come in?
Yes, please. And please make it brief. We're only left with 15 minutes.
Yeah. Actually, as Daniel, one of the panelists said, these mobilizers, the main mobilizers of this Brigade Hamad group, they started saying that they are not even Eritrean, They start saying that we are Tigrayans, who will create a greater Tigray, ignoring the other ethnic groups in Eritrea. They started saying we Tigrayans and the Tigrinya people in the highlands should be one country, and so on. And also amongst them, within them, there are Tigrayans from northern Ethiopia who are frustrated also, who are opportunistic in this situation. So it's a frustrated mob for me.
Thank you for that. So I want to move us to a somewhat different topic. These are clearly events that are having a powerful, profound effect on Eritrea and the diaspora. How do you think these incidents that are occurring at festivals are impacting the next generation of Eritreans? And by those, I mean those who have been born overseas, next generation of Eritreans in the diaspora. Will it make them want to continue to participate in festivals and other Eritrean government activities? Will it make them sympathetic with the opposition, or will it make them sort of apolitical and not interested in participating in Eritrean politics at all? So again, asking about Eritreans in the diaspora who have been born overseas. And anyone could start. And also, please make your remarks very, very brief, because I have one last question and we're only left with 15 minutes.
May I?
Yes, go ahead.
All right. So I think the Eritrean diaspora, the Eritrean born outside of Eritrea, they are engaged. They are watching. Most of them who are actively engaged are actually a very pro-democracy and pro-human rights activists. We can mention a couple of them. Vanessa Tsahaye, who was the founder of One Day Siyum, after the name of the detained Eritrean journalist. We also have Bethlehem Dawit Isaak, another a daughter of the detained Eritrean Swedish journalist Dawit Isaak. So these girls were born in Sweden, and then now they're at the forefront of peers like them who are born outside of Eritrea, now learning about their immediate. One is her father, Bethlehem, the other is her uncle. They are not only learning and educating others like themselves about the atrocities that are happening in Eritrea, directly affecting them, but also recruiting teams of incredible individual young people with hyphenated citizenship around the world to be informed of what's happening in the country. And now, mind you, these young people are born in the countries where there is democratic rules, there is something called rule of law, justice, and all that. So that they have this understanding that what's happening in Eritrea actually is something that's outrageous in their mind. So there are, my hope is to see more of those kind of motivated young hyphenated Eritreans to continue to push for, exposing the abuses and the oppressive regime in Eritrea, and hopefully be also the answer for the change and democracy that many of these young Eritreans now, refugees who are struggling and trying to find a space to express themselves and for the world to know what's happening in them. So again, the whole issue, we have to wrap it under the root cause of all this problem that we're facing, not only in Eritrea, but also now it's following us wherever we might have gotten a refuge, is Eritrean regime. So I think that's how I would like to see it. And I think I see a lot of positive and inspiring evidence of young people taking the mantle from their parents or relatives who are Eritreans and sharing their stories, and now also at the forefront of the struggle for democracy and change.
Thank you, Saba. I think Daniel had a comment also.
Yes, thank you. We are talking about the future of these events that have been going on for decades. So rest assured, they will go on for decades to come. I don't think it's that simple to stop them. That means not necessarily. When I say that, some people actually hear, okay, oh, you want dictatorship in Eritrea to continue forever. That has nothing to do with what we are talking about. The point is, do Eritreans and the next generation, for that matter, do they have a right to gather wherever they are? Since I'm in the United States, I can only speak of America. Those in Canada can speak of Canada and Sweden and so on. But at the end of the day, they all these Western democratic countries, one thing that they should teach us is, as long as you have a cafeteria of ideas and you do it non-violently, their constitution allows you to support whomever they want, to gather in however you want. And in this case, I wouldn't be gathering about in a festival, as some of my panelists say, is about hate speech and warmongering and so on. Of course it's not. But now, legally and constitutionally speaking, even if it was what you call hate, we have a right to do that. As I may not like Trump supporters in what they say, but I would defend every right they have to express themselves and support themselves whatever they want. Not only Trump supporters, even KKK and Hitler supporters for that matter. Now, let's take let's take that down a notch. This is you can't try to bring something down based on false evidence. The evidence, as someone who attends this event, as someone who is actually, I don't think anybody here has done more than I have done to advance the cause of democracy in Eritrea. As someone who has done that, I am here to defend the future of our community as well. If we can't express ourselves peacefully here, there is no chance that we will be able to even tolerate each other back home. So
we're about out of time, and we have a few more things to discuss.
Yeah, but as someone who, just to wrap up, what I would say is, next generation, let's talk about next year. Next year, it will continue. And then somebody will try to say, I will take the law in my own hands and stop you. That is classic terrorism. That is what Al-Qaeda and ISIS would say. We have tried it peacefully, and peaceful did not work. We're going to go violent. So if they're going to go the route of terrorism, let them. They will have to deal with the loss. But as far as this being able to continue and the support, the ground support it has, starting from myself, it definitely will continue, and I'll make sure that it does.
So just one other, I'll let our other two panelists have a chance to talk in a minute, and then I have one more kind of concluding question to ask, so please be really brief. But one other important question that needs to be asked is, what's the impact of these incidents on host country policies, particularly on immigration and asylum policies, as well as on if either of our two panelists who did not say, I'll take volunteers.
Okay. So if we are talking about the impact of these incidents in terms of the policies of the host countries, well, first, these events and these incidents are bringing a lot of attention to the Eritrean cause and the Eritrean state of affairs in many European countries and in media across the world. The events and the incidents have gained very wide recognition, and a lot of discourse and debate has ensued, which is bringing attention to the forgotten case of Eritrean and the repressive dictatorial regime in Eritrea. Eritrea has always been forgotten because it is not one of those large type countries with lots of resources where a lot of countries have their eyes on. Another element of how these incidents might affect, in my opinion, would be the asylum policies. There is going to be obviously a review and questioning of asylum claims, because we have Eritreans who claim asylum from this regime and this dictatorial government, and then if at the same time you see many of them engage violently to support this regime, then there is consideration as what is happening in Israel about the genuineness of the asylum claims. But above all, the case of Eritrea and the divisions are getting loudly spoken and are getting the highlight focus.
Thank you. Herman, would you like to answer that question about impact on host country policies?
Definitely, it will affect, especially the image of these Eritrean asylum seekers, whether they're in Europe or in US. But funny enough, I haven't seen people becoming violent here in South Africa or in Africa in general. Even Brigade Nahamadu, they were protesting, I think about 3 days ago, but they were peaceful. So it depends on the leniency of the law of those countries, because it's actually backfiring now into the countries themselves, because as the previous speakers, if you are attacking police, about 27 to 30 police in Germany, same in Israel, then definitely these countries would not be asylum friendly. It will definitely affect the asylum seekers there. And some of them are also, I have to mention this, very important, they are Tigrayans, but there was a blanket asylum given to all people who look, because we all resemble the same. Some of them are Tigrayans, and they asked asylum as if they are Eritreans. This also might be questioned in the immigration system very soon. Thanks.
Yeah. Saba, do you have like 30 seconds to answer this? Because I have one final question and we really do need to wrap up in 5 minutes. And I want to give everyone a chance for the final. Should we move on to the final question, or do you have something?
Yeah, go ahead. Go do the final question and I'll try to answer.
Maybe you can build your answer into the answer for the final question. So, we've heard a lot of perspectives here. There's a lot of differing analyses of what's going on, not surprisingly. So as a final question, is there a way forward to bridge such differences and to get past the violence where Eritreans can come together and solve their country's problem? And in your own analysis, what do you think the future of Eritrea is in, say, 10 years from now? So I'm going to give everyone 1 minute. I'm sorry to give you 1 minute for such a big question, but give everyone 1 minute to answer that final question. And Saba, why don't you start us off, since you had your hand up for the last question?
Okay, I just want to comment that the hate speech is not protected by the law. So that's one correction I want to make. And also the Eritrean protesters of these festivals, so-called government-sponsored events, are not violent. For the most part, most of them actually in Europe were canceled legally, and so, nothing had happened after that. The ones that have turned violent, again, I cannot stress enough, the regime that is organizing these events have been behind provoking this violence and perpetuating this image that these guys are violent. In fact, the root cause of all this violence, as I laid out previously, is the regime itself, the Eritrean regime. So I think I want to make the record straight on that, because this is from documented and all written and videotaped and all that events that are happening. So all these different direct actions, non-violent direct actions, might be confusing to some people, but most of these actions are non-violent direct actions. So I want to correct that. And about the future, yes, I think the future of the Eritrean diaspora would be managed so well as long as the interference of the Eritrean regime is curtailed. So with these host countries, I think the previous question you posed, host countries have to make sure that the Eritrean government stop interfering in the affairs of the Eritrean diaspora and dividing and polarizing our communities around the world. And I think that's the way to go about it, and going back to the root cause, which is the Eritrean oppressive regime systems that are imported in the diaspora and where we live outside of Eritrea. Thank you.
Thank you. Daniel.
Yeah, if I may take that, let me actually start with addressing your question.
Please limit your comment to 1 minute. I'm sorry, we're almost out of time.
Yeah, yes, I will, and we'll talk about future of Eritrea in 10 seconds first. The future of Eritrea is very bright, actually. We have a lot of things to fix in terms of especially constitutional ways and so on. But at this time, whether we like it or not, Eritrea is actually one of the most stable countries in the Horn of Africa, and that is something a lot to build on. Its people are really united. Compare them to Ethiopia, compare them to Sudan, Somalia, and so on. So that is something to build on. Now, in order for that to happen, we will need a peaceful transition. And for that peaceful transition in the country, a peaceful transition or peaceful way of doing things is necessary wherever we live. And so at this time, the host countries or wherever we are, it's all about law and order. They should protect the Eritrean community from intimidation, from terrorism. And obviously, like my friend over here said, that there are people who are known as Eritreans, and according to the Prime Minister Ethiopia and the Prime Minister, about 30% of the refugees were actually from Tigray using Eritrean documents. So with all this in account, we need to sort all this out. And at the end of the day, we don't want policies for asylum to go on forever and over in terms of 10 years. We want that to stop so that we will have a country it doesn't have to export refugees and asylum seekers. And in that regard, the future is bright, but violence will take us back decades if we go that route. Thank you.
Who'd like to comment next?
I can go. First off, I'd like to say one of the best ways to go forward would be to avoid, such rhetoric of denationalization and othering of those in the opposition. And a way forward, in my opinion, would be to get these festivals out of the state's hands. And if festivals start to be organized by communities without the intervention of the government and the state, then I don't think anyone would have any problem celebrating their culture and identity. Regarding the future of Eritrea, I'm definitely optimistic. Change is going to come. I am very optimistic and hopeful by the energy and commitment that I have seen in young people who are determined to bring about positive change in their country. So change is definitely going to happen in Eritrea.
Thank you. And Herman, you have the last word before I turn it back to our organizer.
Yeah, as the previous panelists said, actually Eritreans, especially inside Eritrea, they coexist. We are 9 ethnic groups. We live peacefully compared to other countries like Sudan, Ethiopia, Yemen. We know what is happening there. I'm optimistic about the future of Eritrea, but opposing is also healthy, as long as it is constructive. But it is detrimental if we are deconstructive in how we oppose, then that's not good also for us and for our future generation. So we can oppose, it's fine, it's healthy, but we need to tolerate, we need to respect each other, I mean, whether I support the government, whether I support the opposition. Here in South Africa, that's what I like. We attend the independence celebration together. We attend some festivals together, but some of them are in the opposition camp, but we respect each other. So we need to be matured, emotional maturity is very important as we go along. Thanks.
Thank you, Herman. And thank you all for your comments. I've learned a great deal from the session. I feel like we need many more hours of conversation to continue to untangle all of these issues. And with that, I will pass it back to Meron to close us out.
Well, Professor Regan, thank you so much for moderating this session, and to all the panelists. I think we had a wonderful session today. And to all the people who are following the sessions through SETIT and Facebook and other medias, we thank you for joining us in the session. I strongly believe that the Eritrean solution can only be reached by Eritreans sitting on a table and discussing their differences, as we did today. Today's session is, I think, a good example that we can sit down even with our differences, and we can debate, and we can find a common ground for a better Eritrea, for a better development of our people. And I encourage more Eritrean scholars to come forward and shed light and provide informative analysis so that people will understand what is happening and make an informed decision or an informed awareness about their country. With that being said, I wish everyone a great and restful weekend. We thank everyone, the panels, the moderator, our co-sponsors, and all the other technicians who were helping us today. Thank you, everyone. Have a great weekend.
Thank you.
Thank you.
حدنت فطر ولد اللومي حد تفاغر صبح كيتدي لمي تنبو بودس غزي دحر كيتتعسي اندافرس كعنودكا توحس دوه غرسي